6 is, what would be an argument against this that is not hypothetical in nature? So first we got to figure out what is this. This takes us to YouTube. Seems like it's a YouTube short. So that print is kind of small, went by kind of fast. Let me try to read it to you guys. Let me see if I could do it. So it's atheism ain't African. So this first one says, atheism is a theological perspective that denies the existence of a creator while postulating that the material universe is the only reality. In African theological systems, all reality comes from a transcendent being, which is the realm of existence itself, right? Let's see what the next part of the image says. The next one says, atheism is a byproduct of the Indo-European world that was developed in ancient Greece among the atomists and in ancient India within the, whatever that word is, tradition. Atheism has never been observed among pre-colonial Africans. Let's go to the next slide. As soon as it loads, I'll read it. African people have never articulated a materialist view of reality. It said matter, submatter, and antimatter, and everything that can be seen, felt, and thought of from the full spectrum of reality. This is an interesting image. I guess you guys could look this up more in the future. Next slide says, what's that? Biosemiotic thought and communication plays a primary role in African articulations about the purpose and destiny of human beings. These mental functions are deeply rooted in the historical evolution of Homo sapiens. Waiting for the next slide to come up. It says, in African society, in African science and historiography, cosmology containing inert sentience plays a central role in establishing equilibrium and coherence. An atheistic framework which ignores the inherent vital force in all entities is incompatible with the African mode of production. Within African civilizations, metaphysical propositions are developed into knowledge through logical inferences that can affirm or negate hypotheses with respect to the context that they appear. Atheism completely contradicts the developmental process of African societies. Let's see if that's the last slide. I don't remember. Yeah, so that seems to be the last slide. So I hope everyone was able to get it once I started reading it. In the chat, there's Marcus Garvey is the way is there. She says, when I say I'm atheist, I interpret it as no white God. She goes on to say, even if Africans thought of gods, still don't feel that they were right. I can respect ancestors who were real over animism. Okay. With that said, let's go to our resident continental African. Tanzan, do you agree with the information in this short video?
Yeah, to some extent that Africans did believe in, something beyond, just this earth that we see, the material. But when we talk about what is African, we take so much that is not African. Religion is also, to me, not very African, because religion is at the heart of it about belief, about truth. One person saying, we have a truth based on a word. I don't think even in Egypt they have, their texts and so on. Most of those were for priests, and but religion for the people was still, direct. It was still transmissible, and there was not a direct relation between belief and morality, which for me is the one thing that distinguishes religion, is that you have to believe in order to be moral. And for us, your morality was your actions, and your relation with other people. So, well, for me, and for me, atheism is not so much, anti-religion as it's just a byproduct of religion. So if atheism is not African, then neither is religion. It's like Satanism is not African, but neither is, Satanism comes from religion. It's not something that is outside of it. So atheism is the same as Satanism, as nihilism. It's a byproduct of religion. So atheism and religion are two things that are tied together. And to me, they're both not African, but, one thing, but not entirely an African, because the other beauty of African tradition is that we were adaptable. So we didn't have something in the book that says, thou shalt not, believe something new if it's presented to you. We took things as they were. We lived in the present. We took things as whether they were good for us or not, we accepted, or did it sometimes. So I would say that, atheism is, for the modern times, is just as African as religions, and it makes just as much sense as the other one. So I wouldn't, just say outrightly that it's not African. To me, if you have to say it is not African, we have to put religion in there as well. So yeah, but both of those things, Africans do not practice, a negation of the deity, which atheism does. But also we did not seek to prove him, like, how exactly, what are the exact quality and nature of God, which is what, the religions try to do. Like they did try to figure God out. We didn't seek to, not to understand him. It's almost like to break him down. Like even in religion is also very atomistic. It's like trying to figure out the mind of God. What does God want? And you ask him all these questions, and then you look at this book, and now you think you figured him out. So for me, it comes from the same aspect of trying to control, the outside, instead of just trying to be a part of it. I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate that thoughtful response. Carl, what would be an argument against this that is not hypothetical in nature?
So I would say, he said it's African atheism, not from Africa. I would say, so what if it's from Africa or not? So what? Is it accurate? Is it an accurate analysis? Can it be proven? Can we prove the existence of any deity? Can we? And that's the question. Now, a lot of atheists say we cannot prove the existence of any deity. We can't prove they exist. So that's what atheists would say. So to me, whether it's not African or not is irrelevant. It's whether or not it's accurate. And I think that with the harm and with the damage that religion has done, especially European religion, and I'm including Christianity, and even though they originated in the Middle East, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, all the monotheistic murder cults, as John Henry Clark would describe them, I don't see why we're still adhering to these beliefs. Even if you want to stick to a more traditional African spirituality, I'm not against that. But I don't think it really matters whether it's not as African or not, because everything we do doesn't have to be African. I had tacos for lunch the other day. That's not African. But, I'm just worried about the accuracy of the analysis. Is it a correct position to take? And I think when it comes to dealing with the religions that were imposed upon us by our oppressors, I think that is the correct institution to take. The idea to look at it. No white God. These foreign religions were brought to oppress us, to deprive us of our rights and make us less human. So I don't really care so much if it's African. As far as the metaphysical and the construction of reality, I can understand that because we can't prove everything through scientific. And there's some things that we just don't know. And I think that we just have to accept that. I think that African people historically have had a better relationship with the unseen than other groups of people. This is going to be a little off topic, but me being a comic book fan, there was a story where Black Panther was talking to Iron Man. He was like, "I come from the most technologically advanced nation on earth, but yet I still true on roots to consult my ancestors. So even though I still have a technological advantage, I still consult with the unseen, consult with the spirit world to get my answers." So I think that Africans have a better connection with the unseen world than other groups of people, but that still doesn't make atheism incorrect, especially when it comes to monotheistic religion. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that response as well, Carl. I do. Erzuliism, what would be an argument against this that is not hypothetical in nature? What say you?
An argument against what? Atheism is not African?
That's what the video was talking about. Yeah.
Well, I don't have an argument. It's not. Most Caribbean people, most Black people believe that something created this. If it's a higher power, most, if not 99% of people, 99% of our people before, I don't want to say 99%, but from what I feel that most African or Black people believe in the creation, that somebody created this world. So I can argue against that. It's not African to be an atheist. That's not part of the culture, to be honest. Or indigenous people all over the world believe there's a creator. The short atheism, being atheism, came from probably philosophers from Greek. Them people came up with that. I don't believe it's African, so I don't have an argument against that. I could see where they're coming from with that. So that's what I say. I'll pass the mic.
All right, thank you for that. Buana, you go ahead.
Yeah, my belief is, who determines what is African? Who determines that? Because if you are basing what African is, or what is the culture of being African is based on historically or traditionally what our forebears would have done, then I could see where there's an argument for that. But African history and African culture does not stop. It can, as long as African people exist on this planet, that the so-called traditions is continuous. So what Africans would have done 500 years ago may not necessarily be what would Africans do customarily and traditionally right now. So who's to say which is better, which is worse, or which is traditional and which is not? Because Africans on the continent, the ones who remain there, they continue the practices of their forebears. However, our history was interrupted, and the Africans who were beset on boats, they was praying to. Because what's interesting is what he doesn't say in this conversation is Africans traditionally we think as well. Not only do we practice our religion and culture, we also think. So them Africans who was taken on them slave ships, they was praying to them gods, and their prayers wasn't answered. Or if they was answered, they was answered in the most harsh way, because the master lick you beside your head one more time. So the African on the bottom of the boat say, well, maybe this praying to this particular African god ain't working for me. Let me use my brain and start thinking and trying to figure out my way out of the situation for myself. You know what I mean? Let me use my own brain and figure out how do I go about manifestly trying to get out of the situation. There are Africans on the bottom of that boat start to think like that. So forget this god. Forget this African god. There are also Africans on that boat who continued the traditions and brought these ideas to the Americas. And there were also Africans on the bottom of that boat who decided to take on new religions the Jesus Christ of the world, the Islam of the world, etc., etc., etc. So, just because one group of Africans decided to do one particular thing, another group of Africans decided to practice another based on the environment, based on the conditions that was beset on them. So it's like one. So you are saying one is more legitimate than the other because one continued to practice, whereas one decided not to, based on his situation that he was in. And customarily, as a practice, I know Black atheists. And me myself, I could say I'm agnostic. I don't know. So am I less African because I don't continue to practice an African tradition? Who determines that? This being African, I understand that I am a part of a community and a culture, but I am not a part of groupthink. I have my individual mind. I look at the world that I exist in, and I come up with my own conclusions. If they are different from my forebears, I guess that's the case, and be it. But does that consider? Am I less African because I don't consider myself in form and fashion or put myself into that religious box, whether it be Islam, African traditional religions, or Christianity? Am I less African? I don't think so. I don't think so. I am just an African who believes that I don't know about this world beyond me, but I have to deal with the world that I exist in. So I try to use my own reason and ability to try to work out what's before me in the best way I know how to. And that's an African tradition and practice as well. So I don't know. The argument to me is it could go many, many different places and spaces. But for me, I'll just leave it there.
In the chat, Marcus Gavies Dewey says, what is our religion doing today to help our race? Goes on to say, where was the African gods 400 years ago? How did they serve us during slavery or today? Does anyone want to respond to Marcus Gavies Dewey's chats? All right.
Well, I'll respond to that. Right. He's right. He's right, of course. To quote that great white man Karl Marx, he said, a religion is the opiate of the masses, and nobody suffers more than Black people. So, we find solace in religion, but it's not meant to solve our problems. It's meant to, soothe the pain. And we have to, once we take away that Novocaine, that ointment helps soothe the pain, we got to deal with the reality. So if anything, the religion is more of a hindrance than a help.
Yes, sir. I agree with that. I think that, and I don't really like to express as much because I love my brothers who are Christians and Muslims and things like that. But for me, I see it as a form of escapism. You don't want to deal almost like the whole FBA business, but you don't want to deal with the natural world or the problems that exist. You are finding difficulty to confront these things, so you resort to escapism. Well, Jesus is gonna work it out for me one day, in the great by and by. but I feel like we have the ability to reason and think for a reason, and these are reasons why we can work out our problems, solve our problems, and move the race forward. And I think that it has to be, because we have the ability to reason, we have to be able to figure out our problems on our own. Because for me, and I really don't like to say this much, but it seems to me that this unseen being is an absentee landlord. So I have to deal with my problems as they exist. I can't get lucky and hope for something magical or supernatural to happen for me. I got to make it happen. But I'll stop there.
I'm with you on all those cases. I'm agnostic as well. I don't know. I can't sit here with no confidence and say anything. But I will say, if there is that Sky Daddy is a deadbeat. Real talk. Let's finally welcome in this brother here to the panel. Trigger Happy 262. How are you this week?
I'm doing good. First though, I would like to preface that, I don't want to be asked to come on the panel again because this wasn't really an obligation. This is probably the only time I'm doing this, or the only free time I'm doing this. So just as a request, I probably shouldn't ask me again or make there's not going to be any promise of me coming and doing this again. Just to preface before I start. But what I was going to say on the topic, since I suggested it, is two things. One, when we're talking about the topic in regards to atheism, atheism is not it's not necessarily about who created it. It's about the cultural development of particular groups of people and how that development manifested the category of atheism. So it's like if you look at Indo-European cultural, their cultural development and the sort of like idea of how Abrahamic religions are a little bit more centralized as opposed to African spiritual traditions that are decentralized. African religions wouldn't have a need for atheism to develop because that development would, imply that they had a religion that was antagonistic to scientific developments or other developments. But with African spiritual traditions, the profane is intertwined with the spiritual or the sacred. So when I asked the question about whether it's hypothetical or if there's any other argument against it that isn't hypothetical, you can't make the argument for atheism existing by just saying, oh, well, there's a possibility that it would have existed. That doesn't make sense. Like, that's not an argument. And I've seen atheists make this argument consistently. And funny enough, this is supposed to be the people who are intellectual with this topic, but yet they constantly make a hypothetical argument that isn't rooted in any particular evidence as to whether African cultural development would manifest atheism as a category among people. And secondly, the question about whether African people, whether this saved us, it's not really good framing to me because it's more about how this functions within a general society as opposed to a supernatural manifestation about God saving you or a big sky daddy saving you. That's not the framing of the conversation. It's generally just a cultural argument, and whether this particular manifestation helps a people culturally. So yeah.
Yeah, Trigger Happy. I had forgotten that it was you who had posted this prompt actually. But I with that said, I do appreciate you coming through. It was refreshing to actually hear you reason out that thought as opposed to me reading it off of a screen. So I do thank you for coming through, and I hope you will come back in the future. But there's no pressures, of course. With that said, is there anyone? Oh no, actually, did I get to everyone in this? I don't think I got to Buana in this yet, right?
Oh no, you got them.
I have something to add. I don't understand how people are equating this shit to the Abrahamic religion. And if I want to use part of my culture, if you ask somebody if they are voodooist, if you ask them what a voodoo, they don't say voodoo is a religion, it's a way of life. So I don't understand how people are up here only focusing on the Abrahamic religion to be like, oh, that doesn't mean Africa. What? No. Why atheism is against the way African people describe their creator. For people to say, oh, I'm saying that if you claim, I'm not saying you're not African or whatever, but at the end of the day, being an atheist is not part of the traditional African dogma. There's a creation story. That it may not be Allah or Isaac or Abraham, but each African culture or indigenous culture have a creation story. That whole Big Bang Theory, evolution shit, you don't find that in Africa. That's what I wanted to say.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd argue people do equivocate African spiritual traditions with Abrahamic religions by the very reasoning of believing that it's like a supernatural sort of like miracle manifestation, which in my opinion, I'd argue this type of reasoning is because of Abrahamic traditions and how Abrahamic traditions have made it to where people think African spirituality is just like spirits or like some sort of omnipotent beings running around. It's like, no, this is just simply the psychotherapeutic aspects of people's culture. And this is why I attack the idea that African spiritual traditions are supposed to save you. That's not the best framing. It's not about people saving. It's not about God saving you. If you think that this is your conditioning as like probably a former Christian or whatnot, as everyone has that particular conditioning. It's not about that. If the European had to come and constantly erode the traditions of African people to weaken African people, then you can't tell me that these particular traditions have no use or have no sort of use in our liberation, because you're looking at it within a different framing. If it was the case that Europeans had to mold down and erode our tradition, so you have to look at it entirely differently. And I think it is disingenuous to say that that is no use, or that we're supposed to wait for like some spirits or some gods to save us. That's entirely an Abrahamic conception and paradigm.
That's definitely wrong, because in voodoo, and well, I'm just gonna use the Haitian culture because I don't know about other African cultures. And in the voodoo, they say voodoo is a way of life, meaning it's not a religion. It's not a. Sorry. It's not a. They're not waiting for Sky Daddy to do that. Voodoo, and if you ask any voodooist, they tell you, I do what I do because I do it because it's about reciprocity. I do this for this spirit because the spirit is gonna work for me. It's not about and then in the voodoo they believe there's a big God and all the other spirits work for that. So if we want to say we are all tethered to Africa, spirituality was before the Abrahamic religions. I don't understand why you're saying what we're saying that a spiritual person is not waiting for Sky Daddy. A spiritual person is telling you if he does what he's supposed to do, the spirits are gonna help him or her. It's a give and take. As you scratch the spirit's back and the spirits scratch your back. So if we want to say that's fake, that's fiction, blah 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 blah, okay, say that. But that's the African spirituality and the indigenous spirituality doesn't work the same way as the It might work the same way, but I don't think they don't. You pray to Jesus and Jesus do for you. It doesn't come from their spirituality. Doesn't come from the Abrahamic religion. Voodoo is older than that. African spirituality, indigenous spirituality is older than the Abrahamic religions. So I don't understand for you to say that. Oh no, it's the same thing as that. I don't know.
If what is really saying is true, and I believe it is true, because voodoo is much older than the Abrahamic religion, and what he stated is that the relationship is based off of reciprocity. You do for the lowest, and the lowest do for you. If I am at the bottom of the slave ship and I'm doing my 110s for my lowest, and my laws is not doing any kind of reciprocal arrangement in terms of me praying to the Lords and putting out food and doing whatever I need to do for the Lords, and the Lords are not returning that. It's not beyond me, because it's a logical conclusion. Either I am not doing what I'm doing right, or maybe the Lords ain't listening to what I have to say. So that relationship gets canceled out. Why continue the behavior if I'm not getting a reciprocal exchange? And even if we take it out of the boundary of the bottom of the slave ship and even go back to Africa, or whether it's on the continent or even in the Western Hemisphere, if there's no reciprocal exchange, there's no I scratch my back and you scratch your back, then what becomes the purpose of praying to that lower? What becomes the purpose of it? So this is an exchange that it extends beyond the boundary of Abrahamic religion and faith, because as Azuli suggested, this is much older. And if that arrangement is not reciprocal, why should I continue it? Logically, reasonably, and he said it's a way of life. And if that way of life is not of benefit, as I see, is not of benefit to me, why continue it? Just because it's traditional? I think that a thinking man, which we all are, would say, well, we need to renegotiate this arrangement or relationship. That's just me.
Well, if you look at it, I scratch your back, you scratch your back. If we want to use an example, if we use the Haitian Revolution, as they told us, was the first, as they said in the history book, that it was the first nation that revolted against the slave master. And when you read upon the story, the legend or the folklore, they said that the Haitian people who were on the island prayed to the ancestors, to the spirits, and the spirits was with them when they were fighting and getting their freedom. So now when you look back, now Haiti, a lot of Haitian people and a lot of Black people denounce African spirituality or indigenous spirituality. So now look, you could say that the reason that the country is in this condition is because after the spirit helped them and they just denounced them. So now you're paying for what you didn't reciprocate. Just like the one of those Christian men said, Haiti got its independence because it made a deal with the devil. Well, and Haiti's going through it because they made the deal with the devil. If you make the deal with the devil and then you turn around, you don't keep your end of the bargain, you get what you get.
Yeah, I feel it. But he was the person who suggested that they make a deal with the devil. He's a devil, so he would understand.
Well, my liberator is that devil. So I'm not looking at this any kind of way. That's not no skin off my back. That's not the point I was focused on. I was focused on the point that he said Haiti is in this situation that it is after the earthquakes and all those people dying because he made a deal with the devil. What I'm saying is you made the deal with the devil to free you, but then you turn your back on the devil. So that's not a reciprocal relationship,
man. That's a bunch of Haiti's in the condition it is because of European intervention. I hear you talking about Pat Robertson.
How do you know it's a bunch
of
nonsense?
Here's how I know some. I do know that. I do know that. And I'm gonna tell you why I know it. I'm gonna tell you why I know it. Can I finish? Can I finish my point before you interrupt me, please? Okay, I'm gonna tell you how I know it. Because once Haiti got their liberation from France, what happened? France came back. France forced Haiti to pay them for their liberation. So Haiti is not poor because they abandoned the spirits. It's because France forced themselves on them and forced them to pay for their liberation. There's billions of dollars that could have been used to develop Haiti that was going towards France, which is why I understand now why people are against religion, because, instead of looking at things in a material way, we fall back into spookism. So no, it's not no spirits. It's the fact that France forced an indemnity on Haiti. It's the fact that Haiti was invaded multiple times by the Americans, by the French, by their resources stolen, their people taken advantage of. So no, it's no we abandoned the spirits. It's because of Western imperialism, not no spiritual whatnot. That's how I know. History proves that.
In the chat, Marcus Garvey is the way is out there with a lot to say. She says if religion had use, being the creators of it and followers of it, why would we be waiting 400 years later to implement freedom if it was optional? She goes on to say, are we saying the impotence of our gods to assist us as a race is due to the power of the European to make them impotent? That's an interesting question. And then she says, so the Neanderthal heathen has proved our gods as useless. It reminds me of that Deontay Wilder fight with the so-called Gypsy King. Lastly, she says, so what punishment do Europeans get? Because we always see our common justice, but the Europeans remain blameless and in power. Do we say Turkey made a deal with the devil after their earthquake? Does anyone want to comment to any of those comments from Marcus Garvey's way?
No, but
Well, I would say that. Go ahead.
No, I was saying Barbados needs to come on and present arguments.
Go ahead, Carl. Well, you know what? I just thought about something. I know I'm gonna probably get some smoke for this, but there's a large population of Jewish atheists, and they abandon their belief in God because they feel like if a God we serve and we worship him, and he left us in a condition to where we're dying in gas chambers, what's the point of even serving this? So there's a large percentage of Jewish people who are atheists who, after their experience with the Holocaust, they just abandon their belief in God because what's the point of it's not working for us? If we can go through all this and get wiped out the way we did, what's the purpose of even believing in this God? So, I mean, I think material conditions shape belief. So if any African people want to abandon their religion because it's not working for them, it's not serving our liberation, what's the point of having a God if he's not going to help you? What's the point? Like, what am I praying to you for? So for your own narcissism? Is that what I'm doing this for? No. So
can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so some people can say, oh, we're suffering because we abandoned our gods. But the other point some people can say is we're suffering because, we didn't hold on to our gods. So if you look at Africans now, it's either that our gods left us and then we went on to these other people, or we left them and we're not able to practice. But either way, if our religious convictions is a testament to our spiritual beliefs, and if you look at Africans worldwide now, Africans are now practicing African spirituality. So obviously we are practicing the three monotheistic religions. And if we can see that that's not working for us, so whether we were practicing our religions or whether we are practicing these new ones, it doesn't seem to matter where we are, in the hierarchy of life, compared to other people. So the question is, what works for us? What would work for us? We've tried. We for the longest time we worshipped our own, gods, our Shun and our traditional gods, and that did not save us from invasion and from being, put under the foot, or under the point end of the gun. And then we all massively converted. So, we all tried the experiment of abandoning our religions, and that's the experiment we're doing now as Africans. We have wholeheartedly, as a whole, just abandoned all our African religions, from Africa, the Caribbean, and everywhere the blacks are. So you can't blame the old gods anymore. We've left them for 400 years now. So yeah, apart from Haiti, which had a spark and they immediately abandoned it. Yeah, let's not pretend that we are worshiping any African gods. If anything is to blame, the African gods left a long time ago, so we can't blame them now for what they're not doing. So we tried these new religions. We tried to our Christian, the Christians. We tried to our Muslim, the Muslims. Well, that's not working for us either. So I don't take this other position that, oh, it was our African gods who let us down. Well, we left them alone. That didn't change. So obviously it's neither, the African gods, and the answer is not the white gods either. I would say this, that if there is power, if you believe in something that is outside of this, there is some power that is out there. First of all, we believed in it, and secondly, other people are afraid of it, and if they're afraid of it, they're afraid of it for some reason. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Thank you for that, Tan.
When Tan says that the Africans in the we abandon our religions, I want to be very clear that in the Caribbean, the practice of our religions, Obeah and all these other things like that, in the English speaking Caribbean, let me put that caveat. In the English speaking Caribbean, these practices were severely outlawed, and there was severe punishment is if Africans was caught practicing African religion. I find it is astounding that some people in the Caribbean still, hold true to the vestiges of African religions in the Caribbean, even though these practices were severely outlawed and punished. So it wasn't necessarily an abandonment as it was the threat of death in some cases and the threat of severe harm. So I think that it was through, I can't remember the word, but through force that Black people in the Caribbean didn't hold to the religions that they would have left from the continent, bringing them to the Caribbean. I want to be very clear about that. It wasn't just us deciding to just throw it in a trash can, but I'll leave it there.
Tan, could you tell me briefly, what's a creation story from Kenya?
One of the most famous one is the Kikuyu one, where there was the Agikuyu, the first man, and then his wife Mumbi, and so they had the first man and woman, and they came from Mount Kirinyaga, which is now Mount Kenya, where Kenya is named after. So God gave them after he put the first man and the first woman, Agikoyo and Mumbi, together. And so they had 9 children. They had 9 daughters. So when their daughters were when they reached the age of marriage, Agikoyo and Mumbi went to God and asked them, Ngai, that's God, Ngai, well, what shall we do with our daughters now that they are grown? And so the Ngai, God created sent 9 men to go, and 8 men, I think. The last of the girls was left, and that's a tradition too. The last of the girls was left to take care of the parents when they got old, and then the rest of them were given the young men to marry. So that also is a bit of so Kikuyu tribes are named after the 9 original daughters of Mumbi and Agikoyo, and so that was one of the creation stories. Some of them, the people come from, from a lake or a river, and then they come out and they meet the man and the woman. Some of them are made from, like the earth, the dust of the earth, and it's made into a mud. But yes, that's one of them. So the man and the woman, and then the daughters were created first.
Thank you for that, Tan.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to
Coco, you see that? No, hold on, Coco. You see that? You see their creation story. They have a man in the story and they have a woman in the story. But
Absolutely.
we get beaten to us. We have 2 men, and then they turn the woman into a ghost. They turn the woman into the Holy Ghost. And it's like, okay, so the man, so the ghost god impregnate the physical human or woman, and they had a child. This is what we've been taught in the Caribbean. Yeah, so it's just interesting how they take the woman out of the equation completely, and we get in a fuss and not understanding why we have this arrangement or relationship, how we denigrate the women in the West. But that's a whole nother matter. I'll leave it.
I want to thank Trigger Happy 262 for coming up tonight during that topic. I heard what you said, but I do wish that you will choose to join us again in the future. In the meantime, we'll go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 7 tonight.